Why is it that so many people in their 20s are working harder than ever, but still feel like they're falling behind financially? I've been there too. When I was just starting out, I thought building wealth meant grinding endlessly, saving every single dollar, and hoping it would magically add up. But the truth is, it doesn't work that way. And in this video, I'm going to break down the real facts about building wealth in your 20s without hype, without shortcuts, just the strategies that actually work. By the end, you'll know exactly how to lay the foundation for financial freedom early on. Most people in their 20s are working harder than ever before, juggling multiple jobs, side hustles, and trying to stay afloat in an economy that feels like it's moving faster than they can catch up. The problem is, despite all that effort, many still feel broke, overwhelmed, and confused about why the money isn't stacking up the way they thought it would. They put in hours of work, they cut back on spending, yet their bank accounts don't reflect the hustle. This creates a cycle of frustration where it seems like no matter how much energy they put into earning, they're just spinning their wheels. The deeper issue is that most young adults are focusing on the wrong part of wealth building. They chase high incomes without realizing that income alone doesn't equal wealth. They might earn a decent paycheck, but if it all gets spent, or worse, if it goes to debt payments, then they're not moving forward. This leads to the common trap of lifestyle inflation, where every small raise or new side income stream just gets absorbed by a bigger lifestyle, nicer car, better apartment, or extra subscriptions. The result is that, even though they're technically making more money, they feel like they're standing still financially. The solution starts with understanding the difference between income and wealth. Wealth isn't about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep and what you do with it. Instead of measuring progress by a paycheck amount, the focus should be on building a gap between what comes in and what goes out, then channeling that gap into assets that grow over time. For someone in their 20s, that might mean living below their means, avoiding unnecessary debt, and directing savings into investments that compound. The earlier this starts, the more powerful the results, because compounding works best with time. Rather than obsessing over chasing the biggest paycheck right away, the smarter move is to develop strong financial habits that ensure no matter how much money is coming in, a portion is consistently being put to work. This shift in mindset is what separates people who are always broke despite working hard from those who quietly build a financial foundation that supports them later. A good example of this can be seen in two different approaches young professionals often take. Imagine one person making $4 in a month, but spending nearly all of it on rent, car payments, eating out, and keeping up with friends' lifestyles. On paper, they look like they're doing fine, but in reality, they're one unexpected bill away from financial stress. Now compare that to another person earning the exact same amount, but choosing to live in a modest apartment, driving a used car, and setting aside $800 each month into a low-cost index fund. At first glance, it doesn't seem glamorous, and they might even feel like they're missing out. But fast forward 5 or 10 years, and the second person has built an investment account worth tens of thousands of dollars, while the first person is still starting from zero, hoping the next raise will finally make life easier. The difference isn't how hard they worked. Both worked equally hard. The difference was in the approach to handling money. One focused only on income and lifestyle, while the other focused on building wealth. When I was first starting out in my early 20s, I thought I had everything figured out about money. The problem was, I believed that as long as I was working hard and saving a little here and there, eventually I'd be fine. But reality hit me quickly. No matter how many hours I put in or how much I thought I was budgeting, I always felt like I was one step behind. It was stressful watching bills eat away at my paycheck and realizing that I wasn't really making progress. And that's a problem so many young people run into. We grow up hearing generic advice like, just save money, or don't spend too much. But we're rarely taught the practical side of what to do with that money once it's saved, or how to avoid the common traps that keep us stuck. For me, the trap was assuming that working harder alone was the answer. I didn't realize that without a real plan, I was just running in place. The solution came when I finally sat down and looked honestly at where my money was going. Instead of just glancing at my bank balance and hoping there would be enough at the end of the month, I forced myself to track every dollar. I broke down my spending into categories: rent, food, car, entertainment, and immediately saw how much I was wasting on things that weren't adding value to my life. This gave me clarity. Once I understood the numbers, I could start making intentional changes. I cut out unnecessary expenses, set up automatic savings, and shifted my focus toward building assets rather than just piling up cash. That mindset shift made all the difference. Instead of feeling like I had to grind endlessly just to stay afloat, I began to see progress, even if it was slow at first. The key wasn't about depriving myself completely. It was about creating a system where my money had a purpose, and that purpose was to build long-term stability. Here's an example to make it clear. In my early 20s, I had a choice between leasing a brand new car for $400 a month or buying a reliable used car for cash. At the time, the shiny new car was tempting. After all, it felt like a status symbol, and everyone around me seemed to be upgrading their cars the moment they got a steady paycheck. But when I looked at the numbers, I realized that the lease would cost me nearly a few thousand dollars a year, money that would vanish the moment I drove off the lot. By choosing the used car instead, I freed up that $400 a month. I set up an automatic transfer and invested it instead of letting it disappear into lifestyle costs. After a few years, that one decision grew into thousands of dollars in investments, while many of my friends were still stuck in endless car payments. That was the moment I understood the real difference between looking like you're doing well and actually building wealth. It wasn't about the flashy choices, it was about the smart, sometimes boring decisions that added up over time. And the earlier you make those decisions, the easier everything becomes down the line. One of the biggest problems people face in their 20s when it comes to money is falling for the myths about wealth, building that sound convincing but don't hold up in reality. These myths are everywhere, on social media, from friends, or even from family members who mean well but don't have firsthand experience with building wealth themselves. Some people believe that the only way to get rich is to have a high-paying job, while others think they need to take big risks and get lucky with things like crypto or stock picking. There's also the myth that wealth is something that happens overnight if you just stumble onto the right opportunity, and if you haven't made it by a certain age, you're already behind. The problem with these beliefs is that they create unrealistic expectations. They make young people feel like they're failing if they don't strike it big quickly, or worse, they push them into chasing shortcuts that usually don't work out. The result is disappointment, wasted time, and often lost money. The solution is to step back and understand that wealth is built on fundamentals, not hype. It's not about one lucky break, it's about consistent decisions that compound over time. That means focusing less on get-rich-quick schemes and more on proven strategies like budgeting, saving, investing in index funds, and developing valuable skills that increase your earning potential over the long term. When you realize that wealth is less about chasing the next hot trend and more about mastering discipline and patience, everything changes. You stop comparing yourself to the unrealistic stories you see online and start creating a plan that works for you. Instead of feeling like you're already behind, you recognize that your 20s are actually the most powerful time to start because of the decades ahead for compounding to work its magic. The truth is, building wealth isn't flashy in the beginning, but it becomes powerful once those habits stack up year after year. For example, think about two friends who start their financial journeys in completely different ways. The first friend gets caught up in the myth that the only way to get ahead is by striking it rich quickly. They hear about a new crypto coin, throw in $2,000 and hope it skyrockets. Maybe it even doubles for a short time, but then it crashes and they're back to zero, feeling frustrated and like they wasted their chance. They keep chasing new opportunities, thinking the next one will be the big break. But the cycle repeats. The second friend, on the other hand, doesn't buy into the hype. Instead, they start with something simple, saving $300 a month and putting it into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. At first, it looks boring compared to the flashy wins their friend brags about. But fast forward 10 years, and that steady, boring plan turns into over 50,000, not even counting future growth. Meanwhile, the first friend is still trying to recover from the latest, can't-miss investment. The example shows clearly how myths about wealth can trap you into short-term thinking, while the truth about wealth building is that consistent, disciplined action outperforms almost every shortcut. A common problem for people in their 20s is confusing grinding endlessly with actually building wealth. It feels like the harder you work, the more successful you should be. And for many young adults, the solution they turn to is picking up more hours, adding another side hustle, or sacrificing every bit of free time in the name of making money. The issue is that this approach quickly leads to burnout, stress, and in many cases, very little actual financial progress. You might be putting in 60, 70, even 80 hours a week, but if that effort isn't directed toward building assets or increasing long-term earning potential, it's just trading time for money. The danger is that it tricks you into believing you're moving forward because you're always busy, but in reality, you're on a treadmill, working harder without actually getting closer to financial freedom. This creates frustration, exhaustion, and often resentment toward money itself, as though wealth is something reserved only for people who get lucky or come from privileged backgrounds. The solution is to recognize that wealth isn't built through endless hours alone. It's built through leverage, strategy, and systems that allow money to work for you instead of you working for money forever. That doesn't mean you shouldn't work hard. In your 20s, hard work is valuable because it teaches discipline, builds skills, and opens doors. But the difference lies in where that effort goes. Instead of chasing every extra shift or temporary hustle just to keep up, the smarter move is to put your energy into creating systems that separate your time from your income. That might mean learning a high-value skill that can command higher pay, starting a side project that grows into a business, or consistently investing so that your money begins to generate returns without you lifting a finger. The goal isn't to avoid hard work. It's to direct it in a way that creates lasting results, not just short-term paychecks. When you make this shift, you stop feeling like you're always behind because every effort you put in builds on itself instead of resetting at zero each month. An example of this difference is clear when you compare two young professionals who both work extremely hard but in very different ways. One person takes on every overtime shift available at their job, working late nights and weekends. Their paycheck grows a little, but as soon as they stop working, the income stops too. They're exhausted, and because they're constantly chasing the next bit of cash, they don't have the time or energy to learn new skills or think about long-term planning. The other person still works hard, but instead of just piling on hours, they spend their free time learning digital marketing, coding, or another skill that lets them freelance or build an online business. At the same time, they automate their savings and invest even small amounts consistently. After a few years, the first person is still stuck working overtime, while the second person has both higher earning potential from their skill set and growing investments that make money in the background. Both worked hard, but one focused on effort that compounds, while the other focused on effort that disappears the moment the work stops. This example shows clearly that wealth is not about how much you grind, it's about how smartly you use your time, energy, and resources to create leverage that continues to pay off long after the initial work is done. One of the main problems young people face in their 20s is figuring out which strategies for building wealth actually work versus which ones are just noise. There's so much advice out there. Books, podcasts, YouTube videos, social media influencers, and a lot of it is either conflicting, oversimplified, or based on hype. Some people push the idea of cutting every expense to the bone and living as cheaply as possible, while others claim that you need to invest in risky ventures to strike it rich fast. The confusion leads many people to try a little bit of everything without a clear direction, and that lack of focus often means no real progress is made. You might save aggressively for a few months, only to burn out and splurge, or you might invest in something trendy without understanding it, then panic when it goes down in value. The underlying problem is that without a solid foundation and proven strategies, every move feels uncertain, and uncertainty leads to inconsistency, which is the enemy of long-term wealth building. The solution is to cut through the noise and stick to strategies that are time-tested, realistic, and effective. These are not glamorous, and they don't promise overnight success, but they're the ones that actually work in your 20s and continue to work throughout life. It starts with the basics: spend less than you earn, avoid high-interest debt, and automate savings so you never have to rely on willpower alone. Once those habits are in place, the next step is to invest consistently in broad, low-cost index funds or retirement accounts, taking advantage of compound growth over decades. Beyond investing, another proven strategy is developing high-value skills that increase your earning potential. This could mean taking online courses, learning a trade, or finding a niche where you can create additional income streams. The key is consistency, doing these things month after month, year after year, even when it doesn't feel exciting. That consistency is what separates people who quietly build wealth from those who spend their 20s chasing quick wins that never stick. An example of how powerful these proven strategies can be is the story of two people who take very different approaches in their 20s. The first person jumps from one trend to the next: crypto, dropshipping, day trading, never sticking with anything long enough to build stability. Every time something doesn't work, they feel discouraged and tell themselves wealth just isn't possible without luck. Meanwhile, the second person takes a simpler approach. They set up automatic transfers to invest $500 a month into a total stock market index fund. They also focus on improving their career skills, which leads to steady pay raises over time. At first, their results look boring compared to the excitement of quick gains that the first person brags about. But by the end of the decade, that consistent $500 a month has turned into a six-figure investment account, and their higher income gives them even more flexibility to invest moving forward. The first person, by contrast, may have a few small wins, but overall they're still stuck chasing the next thing. This example makes it clear that while the strategies that work aren't flashy, they are effective, and they create the kind of stability and growth that builds real wealth. A major problem for people in their 20s is not realizing how critical it is to lay a strong financial foundation early on. Most assume they'll get serious about money later, maybe in their 30s or 40s, once they're earning more, once life feels more stable, or once they finally have extra money to work with. The issue is that waiting means losing the single biggest advantage you have in your 20s time. Every year you delay building that foundation, you miss out on the compounding effect that turns small, steady efforts into massive results over decades. Without a solid foundation, even a higher income later in life doesn't always translate into financial security. This leads to a cycle where people in their 20s spend years thinking they have time to figure it out, only to wake up a decade later realizing they're starting from zero while others who started earlier are far ahead. The lack of urgency is the real danger, and it's why so many people never build the wealth they're capable of. The solution is to treat your 20s as the launch pad for your financial life by creating systems and habits that support for decades to come. That means starting with the basic, building an emergency fund so unexpected expenses don't knock you off track, avoiding high-interest debt like credit cards, and creating a budget that aligns your spending with your goals instead of your impulses. Once that's in place, the next step is to invest early, even if the amounts are small. Consistency is far more important than size at the beginning, because the earlier you start, the more compounding does the heavy lifting for you. Beyond investing, another piece of the foundation is building good credit, learning how to manage debt responsibly, and protecting yourself with basic insurance so one accident doesn't wipe out your progress. It's not about doing everything perfectly, it's about creating a framework where your financial habits naturally push you forward instead of holding you back. Once those systems are in place, every raise bonus or side hustle you pick up in the future accelerates your progress rather than just disappearing into lifestyle upgrades. An example of this can be seen in two people with the same starting salary in their 20s. The first person tells themselves they'll worry about money later, so they spend freely, rely on credit cards for emergencies, and delay investing until they feel ready. A decade later, they might be making more money, but they're still carrying debt, their savings are inconsistent, and they're stressed every time a big expense comes up. The second person, meanwhile, starts small but builds the right foundation from the beginning. They save $100,000 in an emergency fund, automate a modest investment each month, and avoid taking on unnecessary debt. Over time, their investments grow steadily, their credit score improves, and they're in a position to buy a home, start a business, or invest more aggressively when opportunities come along. By the time both reach their 30s, the difference is enormous. The first person is starting from scratch with little to show for years of hard work, while the second has a strong base of savings and investments that continue to grow on autopilot. That contrast shows why the foundation you build in your 20s matters so much. Not because of how much money you're starting with, but because of the habits and systems that determine where you'll end up later in life. So to wrap this up, here's what we've learned today. Most people in their 20s work hard, but still feel broke because they confuse effort with progress. I shared my own experience of struggling financially until I realized that wealth comes from habits, not just hustling. We busted some of the biggest myths, like thinking you need a high-paying job or a lucky break, when in reality it's about consistent, disciplined strategies that compound over time. We talked about the danger of grinding endlessly without leverage and why proven approaches like saving, investing in index funds, and developing high-value skills always outperform chasing trends. Finally, we covered the importance of building a solid financial foundation early, because the habits you set in your 20s decide how far ahead you'll be later. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a comment below sharing your biggest financial goal in your 20s. And don't miss the next video, Top 7 Money Traps to Avoid in Your 20s Before It's Too Late.